and it will sit like that for 24 to 48 hours. And then we take it out of that jig and take it to a setting jig where it will sit for a couple of weeks, and then it'll be ready to go on the roof. You have to be careful working with steam under pressure. Steam engines have a huge amount of power, and if the steam gets pressurised, something will have to blow or pop. Hence we've got light seals on the end of the steam box, and you can see steam is happily escaping out of there. That ensures there isn't a build-up of pressure, and therefore there's no chance of the actual steam box exploding or blowing, which would be possible if it was pressurised steam. This is one of the wall plates, and as you can see we've steam bent this to create the curves we want to run along the side of the building. It's quite a large piece of timber to bend, so we've put this in the steamer jig for quite a few hours to get the degree of flexibility into it. And then we've actually used the existing frame we've now erected as a mould, as a former, to bend this around. So this whole beam has been bent round the jowl posts on the frame to create this effect, left there to settle for a few days before we brought it up here and popped it down on the tenons coming out of these jowl posts.
You can mark where your tenons are.
So this is on top of the jowl post, and this is a tenon coming up that's going to pick up the steam bent wall plate as it runs through. This tenon is set off at a slight angle. If we were putting in a straight wall plate, it would be more like that, but because we're allowing for the curve, which is going to sweep round through there, we've offset the tenon to that angle. Although sometimes you can find pieces of wood that have this type of curve, it's quite difficult to find the exact bend you want to fit a whole outside curve of a building. So steaming really comes into its own when you want to create these perfect shapes to form the outer curves of the building.
You have to somehow get in your head like the idea of curves and of round shapes and how to work with them. As if it's square, maybe it's a little bit more easy, but once you get to the stage where you can understand the curve and you can understand the circle, how it works and how to work with it, it's extremely interesting.
Trees that have grown with a curve or an bend like this are usually not wanted in commercial forestry, but they can actually be really useful if you're looking to create a building with curved wall plates. We spend quite a bit of time steam bending timbers to create shapes like this, but in a lot of cases you can find them naturally growing in the woodlands. For me, my approach with these is to actually design buildings around the shapes I'm finding. That also makes me look at the whole approach we have towards designing buildings, and in particular architecture in relation to buildings. A lot of architecture works around actually designing an image and an idea and then finding the resources for it at a later date. One of the things that foresters can do to link up with architecture is to actually invite architects to the forest and let them know what is available, rather than designing the house and searching for all the materials from all around the globe. We're at the rear end of the building here, and the wall plate that runs around sweeps out into a curve here. But rather than following the same level all the way around, I've decided to drop the wall plate. So we've got kind of a swooping tail end to the end of the building here. And I think that's going to look really nice as the shingles come down over the top of it. We've also been laying out the first lot of rafters now. These are quite a few weeks of intensive steam bending to get this number ready. And it's really nice to see the shape of how the roof is going to form.
That's 5, is it? From that last one, we've got 1, 2, 3.
This is just an initial layout. Each of these will have to come down, be shaped, repositioned and jointed into the ridgepole and into the wall plate. They'll also need to be cut plumb at the top, so they sit flush on the ridgepole rather than side to side as they are at the moment.
Done a few of these with Ben now, and that looks like it's set to continue into the future, which is great. That's a great thing about doing this, really, is sort of gaining the skills and sort of honing the process, you know, improving the techniques that we're using with each build, knowing that one day I'll be able to, hopefully, be able to use all these things on building my own place. So.
The timbers on this particular stem are ideal size for roof rafters, wind braces, and could be used as they are in a building, even quite a large building, for wind bracing. If I allow them to grow on for another 10 to 15 years, they'll reach a size where I can use them for wall plates and crux, and whole buildings can be made out of them. A pole of, say, 6 or 7 inch diameter of sweet chestnut, which can be reached in about 20 to 25 years quite comfortably. It would take a pole of oak of a similar size would have about 1/10 of the amount of heartwood in it, which is why oak tends to be grown on much longer cycles, whereas sweet chestnut can be harvested anything from 4-year-old for use in roundwood battening through to sort of 40 to 45-year-old for large poles for timber framing. It's also a species that's likely to do better as our climate warms. It's a Mediterranean species and should spread happily further north across the UK. We're in the process of fitting the wind braces at the moment. These wind braces or sway braces are what stop the A-frames or crux frames moving in one direction or the other. The actual structure of an A-frame is very, very strong. That form of the letter A is very solid in that direction, but it can move from one side to the other. So the main purpose of these braces is to stabilise the building and stop any racking of the building. It's quite a slow process. Each one needs a little bit of individual work once you come to actually fit it in place. And with the nature of these wall plates we've got on this building, because they're curving, the angles between the jowl posts and the wall plates are all slightly different, so everyone needs individually hand sculpting into place. They're then temporarily ratcheted up with these ratchet straps until we've got them all in place and we're totally happy with the positions and the angles of them, and then we'll drill through and peg. Each tenon will have 2 5/8 of an inch peg straight through there, so there'll be 4 pegs into each, and that will lock the whole building together. Once that's done, we can then take off all this temporary bracing and any ropes, and the building will be freestanding at that point. This is our wind brace mitre box. It's designed to be able to put a round pole, which we're going to use as a wind brace, into the box, and then cut the exact angle across here at 45 in order that the tenons coming out each end go in at 90 degrees to the jowl post and the wall plate. There's 2 parts to the box. There's the main box itself, which the wind brace is sitting in, and then there's the template, which we can then use to offer up between an upright jowl post and a wall plate. And this particular template, we sit this piece onto a flat we've made on the jowl post or wall plate, and then we can scribe around the inside to make the mortise for which this tenon will then fit into. For making mortises, the traditional method, and one that we teach to start with on any of our builds, is to work with hand chisels and mauls, and this involves using a corner chisel to cut the right angles and then dig out the mortise with a series of framing chisels. When you're doing a great deal of them, the commercial alternative is using what we call a chain mortiser, which is basically a chainsaw chain, although a lot thicker, which actually cuts out a great chunk out of the mortise in one go. These can be angled, orientated and moved quite easily once the mortise is clamped or ratcheted on to the pole you're trying to cut the mortise out of. This is the Woodland House, the first prototype roundwood timber frame building I got involved with. I've been living in it since, and it's really out of this all the ideas for roundwood timber framing have evolved. This internal wall, which is an earth plaster from the pond in the woods, has got chestnut lath underneath, and you can see where the tannins from the chestnut have come through and affected the colour of the wall. It gives it a very medieval appearance. It also works as a passive solar wall in the winter. When the sun is lower and shines through onto it in the winter, this will absorb heat and then let it back out into the room in the evening when the sun has long disappeared.